Welcome to round 3 of the Nova Scotia Labor Day Open 2024. This game was wild. This was an amazing game. I think this is the game where I played the best of all of the rounds in this tournament, actually. It was definitely my favorite. And I didn't even win. In fact, I lost this game, but it's still totally my favorite. I was playing against an opponent who was right around 300 points higher rated than me, so I knew it was going to be a very difficult game, but I feel like I played really well. I feel like I had the initiative for most of the game, and then my attack didn't really win, and I'll show you through the game in a minute. My attack didn't win, but so there's something to learn there about how I could have made my attack a little bit better and had a better outcome from it. But what I was able to do was bring it down into an end game that should have been a draw. And for me, getting a draw against someone who's 300 points higher rated than me, that sounds like a fantastic outcome. And that's what the outcome absolutely should have been. I was not able to draw the end game, and so there's also very much some things to learn about how I played this endgame and how I can draw a very similar endgame in the future. So let me show you through the game. Let me pull up the chessboard here. And here it is. So as you can see, my rating is 1536 and my opponent is 1834. So as I said, just about 300 points higher rated than me. I was playing with the white pieces. I played e4 and my opponent played the Scandinavian. And I had actually just studied a bit about the Scandinavian because I had sort of struggled against this opening. And so I did a bit of study. And then on move 2, I was out of prep. I had studied various lines where the queen takes, because that's what a lot of people do. And then you bring the knight, and then either the queen goes over here to a5 or the queen goes back to d8. But this is called the modern variation. Yes, the modern variation. And I have not studied this. I actually faced this twice in this tournament. We'll see it again in round 5. Anyway, so I was just making it up from here. So I brought my knight out, black captures, and then I figured, all right, I should just, get my pieces active, follow opening principles. I left the tension with the two knights for a while, and probably at some point I could have relieved that tension, but I decided just to leave it for now. And black played c5, which I thought was a little bit weird, but it did kind of seem like it restricted the movement of my d-pawn a little bit later. So I castled, bishop e7, and then I played d3. This is where I really would have liked to play d4, and the engine and the database actually both like d4 better here. Probably just because, it fights for central control. It's very active. It gives my bishop this square potentially to be looking at the king side later on. But I just couldn't quite figure out whether this was better for me or not. But it turns out it is just fine. Let's see, what line was I looking at here? If knight takes... Yeah. Okay, so this is the line that I didn't like. Sorry, I was just refreshing my memory here. I didn't like that if I take the pawn here, then this trade means that I have doubled isolated pawns right out of the gate. And this didn't seem better for white. But the line that works is, instead of capturing the pawn right away, we capture the knight first. And then we are temporarily down a pawn, but now after retreating the bishop, we have some pressure on both of these pawns, and we're going to win our pawn back pretty soon. Something like this, right? So let's go back. This is what the engine and the database both like, but I wasn't sure playing over the board, and so I just played d3, and I figured this was a nice position with my bishop, and it gives my other bishop room to develop. So we played some more developing moves. Black got castled. I brought out rook e1. And now in this position, I was struggling to come up with a plan. So that's one issue with not really knowing this variation of the opening, is I wasn't really sure what to do here. And this is a part of my game where I still kind of struggle, is coming up with a plan in these sorts of positions. But one thing I was seeing was knight e5. I felt like I had pretty good control of e5, and then I thought, if takes, I can take with the rook, which looks a little bit awkward, but if the rook ever gets targeted, I can swing it over here because now there's a bunch of lines opening up against my opponent's king side. And so that's what happened in the game. We got to this position. But it turns out that was not a bad idea, but what would have been a better idea was actually removing this knight first and kind of preparing my knight to go up here. If takes with the pawn, then I can actually slide my bishop here. Black has to do something about this knight, and if I trade that knight off, now I play knight e5, and now it can't easily be removed the same way that it could before when there was a knight here on c6. So that's an interesting line. I did not see that, but I played knight e5. We traded, and then after bishop b7, I brought my queen. And so this is where I actually, it felt a little bit, it felt like it might be unsound or dubious. Like I wasn't really sure. It seemed like my rook in that position up on e5, that didn't really seem like the right square for it. But I also felt like I have quite a bit of pressure against the king side already. This is where I was actually kind of wishing that I had put my pawn on d4 so that this bishop could come back and could also join into the attack. But maybe d4 will come later. So I wasn't sure, but I felt like let's give it a try. Let's see if it works. So as planned, I rotated my rook around to h5. And now black played this move, which I really wasn't anticipating, because I felt like this bishop was a key defender of this pawn. And what I wanted to do ultimately was bring my bishop to h6 and attack that pawn because it's pinned. And so I didn't see why black wanted to trade off their bishop. But then I realized, okay, I can either capture with my bishop, in which case they take with the knight, and now my strong dark squared bishop is off the board, right? And this bishop is a little bit awkward. It's going to be hard to get this bishop helping with the kingside attack. So the other option is I take with the pawn, but then this knight has a fork on f6, forking my queen and my rook. So I can't take with the pawn. So I thought for quite a while on this move. I spent quite a bit of time, and I was going to take with my bishop, but then I actually found the only move that maintains an advantage for white, which is bishop takes d5. I was really proud of myself finding this move, actually, and also very much enjoying the fact that every single bishop on the board is hanging. All of the bishops are staring at each other. They're all hanging all at the same time. So that was pretty fun. And so then, of course, like if they take my dark squared bishop, I take their light squared bishop with a tempo on the rook. If they take my light squared bishop, then now I can win their dark squared bishop, and my attack is looking better. So they captured my light squared bishop with the pawn, and I actually this was another place where my instinct was I should take with the bishop. But what I didn't like about this was this pawn move d4, because then I need to move my bishop back. And not only do I feel like I've lost a tempo, and maybe a very important tempo, because I'm trying to maintain the initiative. I'm trying to maintain the pressure with my attack, and I feel like losing that tempo is a bit problematic. But also, allowing this d4 push means that this bishop is opened up, and black is starting to feel a lot better about their position. So instead, I captured with the pawn. And the downside here is that it damages my pawn structure, and we're actually going to see the weakness of these two pawns a little bit later in the game. But it was the best move according to the engine, because it kind of maintains some sort of tension here. It's still uncertain whether black can kind of push and break through, and this bishop remains part of the attack. So black was on the defensive here, and black brought the queen to defend here. I played queen h3, and queen h3 was probably not the best move. I was wanting to push to cause pressure on this H pawn, but really pushing to H6 kind of takes a lot out of the attack. My plan was if black played H6, I might just be able to sack the bishop right away. And then if takes and then takes, I was thinking, the rook is active, the king is open, I'm hitting the queen. But actually, queen G7 is perfectly fine. And then if I play rook H4 to kind of bring the rook around here, then bishop C8 actually holds everything for black. And so that's what I was thinking when I played this queen H3 move. But it turns out it kind of doesn't work. There were some better moves here, though. Let's see. Sorry, I was in the wrong position. So back here, instead of playing queen H3, rook H6 is actually kind of a nice move. I didn't see this move because, for one thing, the pawn is pinned by the queen, so it can't take the rook. And then the queen can't take because of the bishop. And so I didn't see or consider this, but it's interesting because it means that the queen can't hang out on this rank, and it maybe keeps my attack going a little bit better. Another move that the engine likes is F4, with the idea of maybe pushing further and then also maybe bringing this rook around. Sorry, I can't draw arrows, but bringing this rook around into the attack at some point as well. But anyway, I played queen H3 here, and black did not play H6. It would have been interesting to see how that went, but black brought the queen here. I attacked because the rook is defended. Queen goes back and rook goes here on G3. And basically I'm just maintaining this pin with the rook, and I still want to bring this bishop over, and then maybe I even want to bring my queen and add even more pressure along the G file. A move I didn't see, though, was this bishop C8 move, which it's a little bit of a concession because it breaks the coordination of these rooks, but it also limits what my queen can do. So I can't move anywhere along this diagonal. I can't go there because then I lose the queen. And initially I was thinking, well, queen H5 is really the only move, right? But that felt a little bit passive somehow. Like it doesn't feel like it's contributing to my attack. It's just responding to what black is doing. But then I found this move, queen H6, and that was the right move. Taking here would be quite bad for black because then I take back, this pawn is still pinned and it's going to be lost. I'm going to either take it with the rook or with the bishop on the next move. And so black instead was forced to play G6. And this, as it turns out, was essentially how I cashed out from my attack. My attack could still actually continue on a little bit from here. But what my attack really accomplished was weakening the dark squares around the king, and I still have a dark squared bishop on the board. So I should be able to exploit these dark squared weaknesses. I think during the game, this was one of those times when I felt, whoops, bumped my microphone here, when I felt a little bit discouraged, actually, because I felt like my attack should have had a better outcome, that there should have been some loss of material for black, or obviously a checkmate would have been nice. Playing against an 1830, I'm not going to get any cheap checkmates for sure. But I wasn't as happy with this weakening of the dark squares as I probably should have been, and I should have kept the pressure on. And at this point, I felt like my attack was done, and I sort of started playing as if my attack was done. So I guess I continued on for a couple moves. I felt like, getting control of this dark square and then maybe bringing my bishop at some point would be great. Keep in mind this whole time, this bishop is defending this pawn. So this is one of the issues with damaging my pawn structure here, is if the bishop ever moves, the queen can come down and take this pawn, and then the queen is not only threatening the rook, but also threatening a back rank checkmate. So it's a fairly sharp position, and I felt like moving the rook over might help to deflect this queen somewhere so I can continue my attack. But then the queen comes back to G7, and this makes the queen incredibly passive. It's still holding this long diagonal, but the queen is pretty passive, and I don't want to trade queens yet, because I feel like my attack should still have some level of strength. So I bring my queen back, and then black takes this file. And this is where my attack really kind of died. Probably I could have played bishop g5 here, with the idea of putting the bishop here and then bringing the queen and checkmating my opponent. The problem with bishop g5 is queen takes c3. And now my rook, as I mentioned before, my rook is under attack and there's potentially checkmate. And now there's another rook that can come into play. So, for example, I calculated this possibility where the bishop can come to f6 anyway, and it actually defends the rook x-raying through the queen. But that doesn't work because simply rook e1 check, and then after takes, this is checkmate. So my back rank is too weak for this idea. Something I looked at after the game was, whoops, did I end up in the wrong place? Yeah, so back in this position, instead of bishop g5, looking at this line when I was analyzing the game later, I considered h3. This is not a move that I considered during the game. Actually, I may have considered it during the game with the idea that now I don't have any back rank issues. And so now if, say, black plays this move to try to block out my queen from coming in, now it seems like this bishop g5 move probably works. And I think there's still a way for black to defend, but now if takes, bishop f6, then this little trick doesn't work anymore because rook takes, queen takes, king just goes to h2, and now my attack is looking pretty good. King can come to h7 to try to prevent the queen from coming in, but then after rook e3, I'm hitting the queen, and I have this file, and white is almost certainly better here. There's another variation here I had in my notes. Yeah, I think this is if black found this move, then it's still basically equal because I can't manage, whoops. Because if black does that, then I can't really manage to get in with any of my pieces. Like black can still defend, but maybe white is a little bit better. I'm not sure. It turns out the best move here, according to the engine, is this bizarre looking rook f6. And the reason this is the best move is a reason that I didn't think of at all during the game. It blocks off the queen from attacking this pawn. And so now I can start to do something with this bishop, either here or here. I can start to maybe bring my queen in. I guess I'd have to, I think I would bring, sorry, it's black's move. So if black does something like this, then I think I would bring the bishop in, put the queen in the corner, and now the black queen is incredibly passive, and I should be able to make something happen here. But certainly I did not see the possibility of this rook f6 to block off the queen, but a very interesting idea. So what I did instead is I played rook e1 with the idea of let's get this rook out of this danger and probably just trade off these rooks. And maybe this is where I was kind of starting to feel like maybe this was going to trade down into a drawn endgame because we have opposite colored bishops. And I know that opposite colored bishop endgames tend to be pretty drawish. I wasn't sure whether I knew how to draw an opposite colored bishop endgame, especially with a lot of pawns on the board and especially with a damaged pawn structure. But this is kind of where my mind was going at this point. We traded rooks, black activated the bishop, and then I played this move, queen e7, which probably wasn't very good. My thought was on the next move, black is going to bring their rook, and then I won't have any infiltration squares with my queen. And so I thought, well, if I put my queen there, then now black can't immediately bring the rook over because that pawn is going to fall. And I just thought that this queen could cause some trouble for black, but there was nothing really concrete. And so black just simply offered a queen trade, and I brought my queen back out, and black's rook took the e-file anyway. I brought my bishop back, which was always the plan. After trading that rook, I wanted to bring the bishop back to bring it back to the dark squares around the king. Black offered another trade, and then after quite a bit of thought here, I accepted the trade because now I had pretty much resigned myself to the fact that this is probably going to be a draw, or could be a draw, that I should probably play for a draw. And so I traded the queens. I put my bishop on g5 and I offered a draw in this position because I felt like the rooks were probably going to come off the board soon and we were going to be in an opposite colored bishop endgame with just pawns and opposite colored bishops. My opponent thought about it for quite a while and then declined the draw offer, feeling like he could win. And so we played on. I put my bishop on a more active square. And now this was kind of the point of why he declined the draw is now I basically can't defend this pawn, and so I'm going to be a pawn down in the endgame. So again, this damaging of the pawn structure early on sort of comes back to bite me. But I knew theoretically that even if I'm down a pawn in an opposite colored bishop endgame, I should be able to draw it. And so we traded rooks. I ended up losing that pawn, and I tried to hold this endgame. So I was pretty sure that I wanted to put as many pawns on dark squares as I possibly could so that the enemy bishop couldn't touch them and my bishop could defend them. So I started doing that. I have these pawns on dark squares. And also I figured keeping my opponent's pawns on light squares was going to be helpful, kind of. Like if they're on dark squares, then I can target them with my bishop. But if they're on light squares like these ones are, then as soon as I put my bishop on this diagonal, and unless there's help from the king, black can't move these pawns because my bishop is blocking them. So I start activating my king, so does black. Now I put the bishop on this diagonal to block out these pawns. We continue activating our kings. And now it's clear that black is going to try to infiltrate on this side of the board. And my thought was, okay, well, I should be able to put this pawn on a dark square so that the bishop can't attack it, and then bring my king around and defend everything. So I just figured, if all my pawns are on dark squares and my bishop is defending them, and my king just kind of goes wherever the black king goes, then I should be able to create a fortress and defend this position. So we went ahead. I was ready for this bishop to come and attack my g pawn. I was ready to just push it. The king started coming around as I expected. Now in this position, I was originally planning to put my king on b2, but then I realized another plan that black might have is to infiltrate in this direction. And so I thought in this position, if black wants to move this way, then maybe I'll bring my king over here instead and not allow them to infiltrate on d3. But then after playing a waiting move and after black came down this way, I decided actually I'm fine with it if they infiltrate this way. I was worried about this h-pawn, but I figured I can actually just push this h-pawn. If black starts coming in this way, I can push that pawn, and now this is the base of the pawn chain, and my bishop can always defend it, basically. So I put my king there. Black started pushing pawns on this side of the board. I wanted that pawn on a dark square eventually anyway, so this was fine. I played a blunder here, but luckily my opponent did not notice the issue. The best move here actually was just to play h4, and the reason that bishop d6 was a blunder is because now black can actually play g5 and prevent my h4 push here. So that's why this was a blunder, but black did not play g5, didn't see that possibility, and instead played a4, which I thought wasn't a great move because I was a little bit worried about things potentially opening up over here. Probably I shouldn't have been worried about it, but I was worried about black maybe being able to open up in such a way that they got a passed pawn on this side of the board. Whereas now it looks like things are pretty closed over on this side of the board, and this bishop can plant itself there at some point and guard both of these pawns. So I finally played h4, and the king started moving over to this side with the clear idea of trying to make a passed pawn out of the 3-on-2 that's happening on this side of the board. But as was my plan, I just brought my king wherever the opponent's king was going and figured that even though black can make a passed pawn, I should be able to blockade it and not allow it to promote. So black started pushing, we made some trades, and now black got their passed pawn. There's a very simple plan here to draw the game that I missed. I did not see. And the plan is simply to move the bishop over onto this square, as I mentioned earlier, and sit the king here, blockading that pawn. The king is on a dark square, so the bishop can't kick it off. And there is a way for black to bring the king over to this side of the board. I guess I can't draw arrows wherever I want, but if black moves this bishop and then brings the king over, then black can start harassing the pawns on this side of the board. But the thing is, if black hasn't done that, I can just put this bishop here and then just move back and forth between those two squares, keeping an eye on this pawn. My concern was that black could put the king here and put me into some sort of Zugzwang where black is attacking both pawns and I can't leave my bishop here defending both pawns. But the thing is, once black's king is over on this side of the board, now I don't have to be blockading this pawn quite as carefully. Now my king can sort of jump around on the various dark squares around this pawn as long as I'm always able to get back in front if black's king starts coming back over to this side. So that was the drawing plan, and that totally would have worked. This endgame should be a draw. I did not see that over the board. I was getting a bit low on time. It was getting pretty late in the evening. I was getting pretty tired. And so although it looked like I was going to play the right idea, I was not playing the right idea. I think I wanted to keep the bishop here so that if the king ever moved away, I could capture this pawn with the bishop for some reason. So I left the bishop in place. I danced around with the king a little bit. As expected, this king is coming around to infiltrate, and this is where it's clear that I didn't know what the plan was. I was thinking I might have to defend this pawn with my king, but I'm actually already too late. Black can just go here, right? And then I'm done. So this move was not a good one. It wasn't exactly a blunder, but it kind of felt like a blunder after I played it. I kind of realized like, oh, that move doesn't really accomplish anything. But now that my king stepped away from the blockade, black wanted to maybe push that pawn. I'm not sure. I blockade again, and then finally black brings the king and wins that pawn. Now, interestingly enough, after capturing here and black capturing here, this is still a draw. Now, I didn't feel like it was at this point. I felt like I was going to lose that pawn and then maybe this one eventually, and I felt like at this point the game was lost. The game is not yet lost because there's still the same idea. At this point, I have to once again move the bishop to d6, defending this pawn, give up this one, and now the bishop defends the pawn and keeps the b pawn from promoting, and I can bring my king over and look at, I guess I can't put it there because of the bishop, but bring the king and look at getting onto this blockading square. And then even if they prevent me from getting onto that blockading square, this bishop can end up here also covering that square. And so this pawn cannot pass with the bishop and the king both covering that square. So pretty tricky thing to see when I'm tired and low on time, but this position is actually still a draw until I play queen e3 or king e3. And now it's not a draw anymore. And now black can simply just push the b pawn on this side of the board. I thought I had one more trick, not allowing the b pawn to take, but of course the b pawn can just push one more time. And this is where, this is where I resigned the game because there was no way that I could prevent that pawn from promoting. So this was a pretty amazing game, actually, and I'm really proud of how well I played in this game. As I mentioned, I felt like I had the initiative the whole time. I probably had winning chances in the middle game, and I showed some of those lines where I could have maybe kept the attack rolling a little bit. But I'm also just really happy that against such a strong opponent, I was able to bring it down into an end game, which was absolutely a draw. With just a little bit more opposite colored bishop end game knowledge, I should have been able to draw this end game. Obviously not in this position, but certainly back here, not back here, like here, I should have been able to find the drawing plan. which is pretty cool that I got it to this point, and I could have absolutely drawn someone who is 300 points higher rated than me. I keep scrolling my window here. So I wasn't able to draw it. That's definitely something to learn from in this game. But certainly if this type of endgame comes up in the future, I will probably remember what some of the plans are for drawing. So thanks for watching. Thanks for checking out round 3. Round 4 is coming up very soon. Rounds 4 and 5 were pretty good. I maybe didn't play quite as well in those rounds because I was pretty tired out from this game, actually. But still pretty happy with how those rounds went. Also against very difficult, very challenging opponents. And so those videos will be coming soon. Until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.